I don't know about you all, but I came for the food. I don't know how it smells in Arkansas or in Orlando, but it smells like pizza in here. And I like that. That's a good day. But no, it's a huge privilege to be here. I'm glad we can make this work on such short notice. And I live about 40 minutes from here, up near Frisco. And this is why I live. I never intended, I was just telling Carrie right here, I never intended on doing this, speaking in front of people, talking about some of the things I'm going to talk about today. But through the worst experience of my life, I discovered some incredible people who came into my life and mentored me along, and I'll get a little more into that in a little while. But the reason I'm here today isn't because Brian Fleming is some guy who has some incredible ability to overcome adversity, just born resilient. Nothing like that. Self-made people, I hate it when I hear people say, he's a self-made this, he's a self-made that. There are no self-made anythings. Nobody did anything great in their life by themselves. It took other people. And the worst experience of my life became the best experience of my life. And I don't know where all of you are in life right now, whether personally or professionally, but the fact is that we all have bad things happen. You get a lot of these speakers out there, and you've heard these people. They'll say, follow my simple steps, follow my secrets, whatever that means. I don't think I've heard a true secret in a long time. A lot of people say that if you'll just do these certain things or these simple steps, that you can create this sort of bubble of a life where nothing goes wrong. And you know who these people are. You've heard a lot of people, there are people out there teaching that. And it sounds great, and I'm glad they're optimistic, but I just don't teach that. Because, I'm here today to really tell you all the truth, which you already know, and that's that your problems in life are never going away. And people go, boy, Brian, I thought you were a motivational type speaker. And I'm not. If you don't believe me, I have a website called IamNotAMotivationalSpeaker.com. Go to it. If you don't believe me, it goes straight to my website. Because I'm not. I like to think I'm more of an authentic and realistic guy who can help people with the problems where they're at. And based on my own knowledge and experience and other people I've met and the lessons I've learned from them. So the real solution in life is not to create this life where nothing goes wrong, because that isn't going to happen. Because when one thing goes away, you might be dealing with an issue right now. Maybe it's in your family or your career. And that might go away. Maybe it's a bad diagnosis from the doctor. Maybe it's a health issue. Hopefully that will go away. But what happens when that goes away? What happens over here? Eventually something else is going to go wrong, right? So it's not about creating a life that has in this bubble where nothing goes wrong. That's never the goal. The real goal is to become better at dealing with the problems that we face. And a lot of people, they experience tragedy, they experience things in their lives that they don't know how to handle. They're not equipped to handle them. They don't know what to do, and as a result, they just get crushed. It's like going to the gym and taking a styrofoam cup on the floor and just dropping a big weight on top, big barbell on top of it. They just get crushed. And it's because they're usually not connected to other people who can help them be better. They usually have no knowledge as to how to handle an issue like that, and they may have gotten blindsided by it. A lot of times we get through things in life and we think, finally, this issue's over with. Financially, for example, maybe you go through a hard time and you finally get out of debt, you finally do all the right things, you get out of it, and then that week the car breaks down, the water heater breaks, and your kid gets sick. How many of you had a week like that? I've had months like that. It's just one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. Again, and so the goal is not create this life, but to keep your expectation realistic. And I'm careful when I say that, because I'm a real optimist. If I see something somebody says is impossible, I'm set out to prove them wrong. But I'm also realistic at the same time. There's some balance to that. And so today I just want to share a little bit of, not just my story with you, not just my life. I am going to share a little bit of my personal war story with you, just so you have some sort of preface. You have some sort of idea where I'm speaking from, where I'm coming from as I talk to you. But today I really want to talk to you about how to stand firm when everything around you is blowing up. Because I know we have quite a few military veterans in here also, correct? Can you stand up if you're a military veteran, by the way? And where you're at, too. If you're watching by simulcast, stand up. And let's just give them a hand if we could. We appreciate you guys. And I've been to several foreign countries and different places around the world. And it's interesting because I've talked to other military service members of different nations. And from my understanding is that no nation really honors their military and veterans like the United States of America does. There are a lot of people who say, yeah, we get out, we get injured, and we're on our own. Nobody says thank you, nobody supports. That's pretty sad. And, I think about that, and I also think about America. because I've been to so many other places. There are some good places, but there are some really bad places. By the way, if you don't know, America still is the exception. Every place in the world is not like this, in case you've never been outside the United States. This is really unique, what we get to live here. And I hear all the time people talking about how bad the United States is. They talk about all the problems we have. They love to highlight the shortcomings. And I always think about, you got the MVP, the guy at the top, and everybody wants to take shots at him. That comes with the territory. And that's really where the United States is. Even with our problems, I find it interesting that everybody's still trying to come here. Yeah. Even illegally, crossing our borders in this state of Texas, where we're at right now. We must be doing something right. It can't be that bad if everyone's still trying to come here. And so we appreciate our veterans who have made that possible, those who serve presently. And more importantly, even to me, this is a huge honor for me to be here today, because I always love speaking for organizations and companies like yours, because while I was in Afghanistan, we had capabilities that otherwise we would not have had. They were combat capabilities when it came to weapons and ammunition, to body armor protection, bulletproof glass, aircraft, close air support, missile systems that sometimes would pull platoons like mine out of really bad ambush situations. We couldn't always run to the top of a mountain, but we could call in air support. And I know a lot of you, it can be tempting if you're doing a job here working for a company like this one. You can think, well, what real difference does my job make? Is it really contributing in any way? Well, like I was just telling him over here, it makes an incredible difference when you take what you do and what your company's full mission is, and you put that practically, where that materializes on a battlefield in a combat zone. It is extremely important. Again, the close air support, the airplanes, the missile systems, all that stuff allows guys like me who are on the ground to get out of situations alive that 20, 30 years ago we would have certainly died in those situations. And so I am truly honored to be here and speaking to all of you today who have made that possible. And I actually used to get up and I used to say I'm humbled to be here. I think everybody gets what I mean by that, but I was talking to my buddy the other day, and he was in the Marine Corps. I was in the Army. He was a Marine Corps infantry guy. I was Army infantry guy. And he said, Brian, I noticed, he said, you were humbled that all those people showed up. He said, I think you meant you were honored. He said, because what would really be humbling is if you came to speak and nobody showed up. I thought, yeah. So that would be awfully humbling. And, I've definitely had those situations in my life. And I've always heard people say also, you can be humble or you can be humbled, or you can have humility or you can be humiliated. And so I've been the guy on both sides of that fence, and I didn't need more than once to be told that, hey, being the humble guy is the best way to be, because it's about other people. And being young like I was in the military, I wasn't always that way. And I'll get to a couple other lessons there on that. But again, I served with the U.S. Army's 10th Mountain Division in Afghanistan. I got married 3 months prior to my deployment. Got married in December, deployed in March of 2006. We only had about 3 months together before, my wife and I, before we went to Afghanistan. And I remember the day and the night before, it was a really awkward feeling. If any of you have ever been deployed, we didn't have kids at the time, thankfully, because that really made it different. But it was kind of like the night before you go to the gas chamber. There's just this feeling of like finality. It's like, I know I volunteered for this and I'm going. But it's different when you sign up for it. But then when you actually go, there's this thought of, this might be my last night with the one I love. And that's a very humbling experience. And you start to realize what's really important in life. And sometimes you experience things in a war zone that really make you realize how important those things are. Sometimes here in life, a lot of people say, well, Brian, some of you might say, I've never been in a war zone. And I'm thankful for that. I'm glad you haven't. But the truth is that I've never been to divorce court. And I've had a lot of things happen to me that I can't relate to you on, but you've all had your own experiences in life that I can't relate to. I don't know what those certain things are like, but the really interesting thing about life is that even though I was in a war zone in Afghanistan, and some of you, all of you, you've had your own situations where you've lost loved ones, you've had relationships that didn't work out, you've been laid off, you've gotten pay cuts, we all have these situations, and it's so interesting to me because I realized as I got out of the hospital and my injury, which I'll talk about, people started relating to me that had no common ground with me, or at least I didn't feel they did. And what I realized is that even though everybody has different experiences, bad things that happen, they all tend to relate to the issues that everyone deals with, because there are only a certain handful of issues that people deal with as human beings. You know, the issues I dealt with coming home from the war in Afghanistan, those weren't just military issues. Those were human issues. That's why people in the civilian world could relate to some of the things I was saying as I started speaking, not just military men and women. Because although the issues were different, the cause of the issue was the same. People deal with post-traumatic stress all the time because they were raped, they were abused, they were abandoned. You name it, they grew up in a bad neighborhood. Same issue coming home from a war zone a lot of men and women deal with. Post-traumatic stress. You have professional football players who deal with traumatic brain injuries. You know, I've had 2 of those, and I'm trying to make some sense today. Now, I think I sound intelligent, but I guess I could fall back on that if you go, this guy's a little out there. Like, hey, I've got a medical record this thick, about the size of an Encyclopedia Britannica, if you're even old enough to know what that is. We all have those issues, and again, it's not the issues that matter. Bad things will happen, but it's how you deal with those issues. And so my mission here today really isn't just to tell you my story, but it's to preface it again, but also share with you some of the lessons that I learned through that really were game changers for me, things that really moved the needle in my life and got me from a really bad place in a war injury to getting to where now I am in my life personally and as a career, and basically how my most intense suffering became so significant that it completely changed my life. It revolutionized my family tree. And it was the bad situation that did it. Through the worst situation came the best of all situations. And I couldn't always say that when I was going through it. I couldn't say it. I couldn't see it when I was going through it. But after looking back on it, I can look back now and say, and it's going to sound crazy, but what I'm about to tell you and share with you, I'm glad all this stuff happened. I wouldn't wish it on myself or anybody for it to ever happen. If you had told me when I was in high school that you're going to go in the military and you're going to get blown up twice, a suicide bomber is going to explode 3 feet away from you in Kandahar while you're fighting the war, I would have said, no, he's not, because I'm going to the University of Miami like I'm planning. I'm going to go to med school and become a doctor like I'm planning. And I had all these things lined up, all these plans that I had. And I had the grades and everything in high school, and that was my plan. And then the senior year of my high school, I just had this sudden change of heart. It was 2003. But again, I was in Afghanistan. About a month after arriving there, my vehicle got blown up. We ran over a double stack of anti-tank mines that were buried in the road. It was April 18th of 2006, and we'd been there again about a month. We were up in the mountains. I was in the lead vehicle. We'd been out there for about a week, and we turned around. We were about to come back to our base, about a day and a half away. Me and about 17 other guys, small infantry platoon, scout platoon. And one morning, about 7 o'clock in the morning, we had one road in and one road out from where we were going. And we knew that, and so did the enemy. And we went over a hill, we came down, and right where it flattened out is where they buried it. A great spot to bury a bomb in the road because we didn't see it. And it blew up my vehicle. It set it on fire. 2 of my guys were injured. Both returned to duty a month later, thankfully. Had to pull one of the guys out of the vehicle. Thankfully, I was uninjured, and I was able to do that. Later on, that actually happened for me in the second story, the second time. So it's one of those things, you get what you give, I think. It's a weird thing how it happens sometimes. But both of those guys, again, they returned to duty a month later. Got a couple pictures here, and figure I like pictures. And let's see here if we can, you got that over there? Oh, we did have pictures. If you end up getting it up there, go ahead and just manually do it if you need to, and I'll try and stick with it. But oh, there you go. All right, so there's a picture. That's the vehicle right there that we were riding in. You can see the in the ground right there. That was where the bomb was buried. Two mines that were designed to destroy a battle tank linked together and hit a Humvee. So I like armor plating and bulletproof glass. It's good stuff. I love it. And it saved our skin that day, and it saved us at other times as well. And again, that's why I told you I appreciate companies like yours who do stuff to support our efforts, because none of us would have walked away from that if they had not been up armored and had bulletproof glass for windows. It would have come straight through on us. And so we're very fortunate for that. This is another picture of that same vehicle. That was my seat right there I was sitting in. And just crazy. This is actually the second vehicle. This is a different vehicle. And this is interesting. I have this philosophy that some things in life just aren't meant to be. Now, I told you my job was infantry, right? Well, I had this crazy ambition after getting blown up once that I wanted to reclass my job to what's called EOD, How many of you know what EOD stands for? Most of you. Explosive Ordnance Disposal. They're the bomb squad. So basically, if it blows up, it's their business. If you see that guy running or lady, you better be in front of them. And I have a lot of friends who were EOD. And for some reason, after getting blown up even the first time, I wanted to reclass to EOD. And so I started the process, and I hit a speed bump. I had this small error on my medical records. It was called a P3 on my profile. Basically, it means you're physically unfit for active duty, which I thought was weird because we were running up and down mountains getting shot at and blown up for the past 5 months in Afghanistan fighting Taliban. And I was in the best shape of my life. So I thought, great, this is barring me. This is holding me back. I had to go all the way to Kandahar Airfield to get that fixed, to get reevaluated by the physician and get that negative mark taken off my medical records. Well, we got 2 miles from the front gate to Kandahar Airfield, and we got blown up on the way. Just kind of an ironic thing, I thought to myself, after looking back on it. I wanted to reclass to EOD, and I get blown up on the way. I mean, of course, I was talking to my wife the night before, and I said, I'm really ready to, it'd be nice to come on back here. It'd be nice to get back home, and, I'm kind of tired of the fighting and the risk and all that. And, sometimes certain things in life take a toll on you, and you just get a little fed up with them. And she said, I support you in anything you do. And she really didn't want me to do EOD, apparently, because she told me that night she hung up the phone, and she prayed, God, whatever it takes, don't let him do it. And I was like, she didn't tell me that. She said, oh, hey, I'm with you. I'm behind you. She does support me. And this was the next day. And so I tell people, you know what, you can believe what you want. All I know is that when it comes to my wife, I just ask her to be a little bit more specific when she's thinking of me and hoping things for me or praying for me. It's like, can you be a little more specific? Because she was hoping and really praying and hoping that I would be home in the end of July specifically. This was back in 2006. The reason for that is because there were rumors going around that we're either coming home in the end of July or getting extended for 90 days in the end of July. I got blown up on July 24th. I arrived in San Antonio at the medical center on July 27th, 3 days later, the end of July. But, this was very unfortunate. What happened in this situation was that I was in that front passenger seat right there, and a white minivan pulled out in front of my vehicle and slowed down. We didn't think anything of it, so my driver went to pass him on the left, just like you pass somebody on the interstate. You get on their left and you pull up beside them. Well, as we got right up next to him, from about me to this gentleman here, passing on the left-hand lane, the entire minivan exploded, and it was being driven by a suicide bomber. And that day, he blew himself and his van into about 10,000 pieces right there in the middle of the street. And I'm happy to report to you also, he was the only one to die that day. But, I woke up in a ditch on the side of the road right there, right outside the vehicle. I just woke up. I had no idea what happened. People asked me, they said, Brian, what was it like? I don't know. I didn't know anything happened until I woke up. And I was face down. I did sort of push up and got to my feet. And, my first thought was, why would I go to sleep here? It's kind of funny now. I look at it and it's like, that is kind of funny, but it's like, I had no idea why I was laying there. I thought, well, maybe we're in a gunfight. Maybe we're in a firefight. Well, nobody's shooting anything. I couldn't find my weapon. It was still in the vehicle. And so it was a really weird experience. My driver ran over, sat me down. He was a medic. That came in real handy. And also he was not injured, so that came in even more handy. And he was taking care of me and wrapping me up. And it was kind of a weird experience because I didn't know what my condition was. I didn't know if I was going to die in that moment because I knew I couldn't really feel much because of the adrenaline and the whole situation, that your body reacts in a certain way. I remember asking him, though, I said, what's my condition? Am I going to make it? And it's so interesting because he said all the right words. He said, oh, hey, you're good. You're good to go. You're going to be fine. You're just, you're scratched up, but you're good. He said everything he was supposed to. Good medic, good guy. Friend of mine to this day. But his physiology gave him away. I could tell by the look in his eye that he wasn't being entirely straight with me. And I thought in that moment, maybe I thought I was going to die in that moment. I didn't think I was going to make it. And because I didn't know who to trust, I knew that my face was 2nd degree burned, my neck was 2nd degree burned, both my hands were 3rd degree burned, just got blasted, woke up on the side of the road. I didn't know what else was happening. And it was one of those moments where you think, this is it. Like, this is my life, and now it's over. And I was angry because I didn't want it to be over yet. I'm too young for this. I'm not going out here, not this way, that sort of thing, that defiance. But it was also there was this fear. And it wasn't one of those questions of, where am I going? I didn't really ask that question because I'm a person of faith already. I dealt with that. But the two questions that did come to me in addition to that was two questions that I didn't feel I could answer. And the fact that I could not answer these questions, that was the absolute most terrifying experience of my life. It was more terrifying than getting blown up. It was more terrifying than getting shot at in a firefight. It was more terrifying than the time in high school I got put in the back of a cop car. I was innocent. They didn't arrest me, but they detained me and held me until they figured out what was happening. But the two questions were really, number one, when I thought my life was at its very end, when I thought this is it, you get this tunnel vision in your mind, and everything that's truly important in life gets narrowly and clearly focused, and everything that really doesn't matter just gets pushed away. And I wish everybody could have that experience without having a near-death type experience or a tragic experience. I've only known to get that experience through really bad situations, and it's happened a couple of times in my life, this being one of the major ones. And the first one was, what did I do with my life that mattered? And then the second one was, what did I do for other people? When I thought it was the end, when I thought this is it, those were the two questions that came to me. And for me personally, I didn't feel like I could entirely answer those questions honestly. I felt like I lived a lot of my life very selfish for myself. Probably not entirely true, but in a lot of ways that probably was the case. So what did I do with my life that mattered, and what did I do for other people? They're two separate questions, but they really came together, and they're really linked together because it basically just told me, I've lived this life, and I did nothing to make it better. I'm just another person who came and went, never remembered, not that being remembered is a goal or anything, but it's like I didn't make the place a better place while I was here. I didn't help anybody, and that was the biggest thing. And so many people get so selfish. Selfish people live the most miserable lives because there's no fulfillment in that. You get zero fulfillment in life when you're living your life for yourself and you have selfish ambitions. It's when you help other people that things happen in you that even psychologically, biologically, there are chemicals released in our brain that make us feel good and feel happy when we do stuff for other people. And to this day, I don't take medication for anxiety or depression or post-traumatic stress. I don't take anything. I found a guy who came into the hospital when I was there, and he said, "Hey, Brian, I'm a Vietnam vet. I was blown up." He started telling jokes about it, and he said, "I'll show you how to do something with this if you're willing." And I know that I'm extremely fortunate. Most people don't have somebody like that in their lives. If you don't have somebody like that in your life, pursue somebody like that in your life. He was a Vietnam vet, had a phosphorus grenade blow up in his hand while on a riverboat on the Vam Cote River in Vietnam. And he said, it was phosphorus. He said he jumped in the water to get the fire out. He said phosphorus burns in water. He said his skin was floating all around him. And he said, "Brian, I was beside myself." He said, "Man, I had to pull myself together." I'm sitting here in burn bandages going, that's sick. But it's awesome. I'm like, wow. I'm like, that's pretty cool. This guy had to this day you can tell he's burned. And I thought, this guy, here was a big thing. I saw a guy who had been where I was, but he didn't stay there. And there was that 1 degree shift in my mind that took place, and a lot of us have this experience. And if you ever think this thought, don't just consider it another thought. Know that is a foundational key to really move the needle in your life. And it's that thought that says, if that person can, maybe I can too. And it sounds very simple. It probably sounds very cliche. You probably hear a lot of speakers say that. But the truth is that's hope. When you're in a bad situation, it's like a buddy of mine. I think it was Rusty Brooks. He lives in East Texas. He was a Marine. And something he said, because he hit rock bottom in his life too, and he has a whole story he tells. But he said, rock bottom, he said, was a good place to begin building a foundation. And sometimes it's that realization you don't get that perspective until you're at that point in life. And so that's the Suicide Bombers minivan. I like to think it wasn't made up in Detroit, near where I grew up, but not that it would have made much of a difference with what he was packing. But this is me about a day and a half after it happened. Interesting thing, that white on my chin you see there, that's actually where my chin strap was. So I wasn't burned behind my chin strap, but I had second-degree burns all around it. So about 4 or 5 months out, I had this really bogus reverse tan line coming down my jawbone. It was kind of crazy looking, but here's what's funny about this picture. When I got blown up, they had to cut my top off me, my jacket and my shirt and everything, because they didn't want to pull it up over my face. And in my shoulder pocket, I had my government ID card, $300 cash because they had Pizza Hut and Burger King at Kandahar Airfield. And I was just going to be a glutton for Burger King and just spend as much as I could because I never got that kind of food where I was. And my iPod. Well, I never got any of those back once they cut it off me. So somebody put all that to good use. But I say that to say it just wasn't me. So three $100 bills, somebody took that, guarantee it. But I got to Germany en route from Afghanistan to San Antonio. That was the midway stop. And this lady walks in with this big camera and she says, "Hey, Sergeant Fleming, I need to take your picture." And I'm like, "Lady, I've seen myself in the mirror." And this was, before they cleaned me up. I saw myself in the mirror as I walked past it, and I didn't recognize myself because I had all the liquids coming out. Well, I thought, man, this is really not a good time to take a picture. But if you insist, I thought I'd smile a little bit, but I was actually burned. You can't really tell. They just scraped some with my lips. But this picture was actually on my government-issued military ID card for the remaining time in the military. And I didn't always look like that. A few months after, I started healing. And so I'd go through the gates, just like you do here, check ID cards, and people look at it and just go double take. They'd be like, "Dear God, is that you?" Like, what happened, And I got tired of telling the story, so eventually I just started telling them stuff like I'm allergic to suicide bombers, they're bad for my skin. I don't know. I have a lot of buddies who are worse off, and a lot worse off than me in their injuries and their burns. And that was one of the big things, though. I got perspective. Once I got to the medical center, I saw guys who were far worse injured than I was, missing legs, missing arms, sometimes both, burns far more severely than I was. And people think of those places as a really depressing place, those hospitals, and it can be. But it's also one of the funniest places you'll ever go. You got people picking on each other in there that you just can't pick on people like that elsewhere. You got the amputee guy missing both his legs, and the burn guy, as he's jumping from his wheelchair to the chair, the burn guy pulls the chair out from under him, and he goes to the ground. And so he's yelling and cursing at him and calling him a crispy critter, and they're just like going at it. And it's the funniest. You look at it and you go, boy, things really aren't that bad in my life. And so, that was my hand. By the way, if you're still eating pizza, you're probably not going to eat anymore. But they did surgery on my hands, and they took skin grafts, which, by the way, if you know where they usually end up taking that from, they usually start from your backside. That's what I'm trying to get at. Now, if you shook my hand today, or if you shake my hand, don't worry, you weren't violated. That's not where they took it from. All right, I do have leg hair on my hands, apparently. My wife teases me. They actually took the skin from my legs, which is a little less weird, but not really. But, I got full range of motion again. I'm very, very fortunate. There's my wife, by the way, Jamie, and told you I got me a good one, so she didn't leave my side at all. Oh, and there's my Purple Heart plate. It says, "Nice try." That was that was to the suicide bomber. Remember, the only guy who died? I didn't know what else to say. I'm like, man, the guy did all that, and it's like he was the only one. What do you say? I tried boom, bang, ouch, and by the way, those are all taken in the state of Texas on license plates. In fact, I was up in Frisco a few months ago, near where I live, and I saw the guy who had the ouch plate. It was a Purple Heart plate. I took a picture of it. It was like some landscaping business. I couldn't believe I found the guy in the whole state of Texas. So he got it before I did, but that's my website, Brian C. Fleming, and also blownupguy.com goes to the same place. A lot of people would forget my name or how to spell it, but they always say, "Hey, aren't you that guy who got blown up?" So I just thought it was an easy way to remember it. But I want to get to a couple of points here that are more relevant to you, because how does this all apply to you? It doesn't do any good for me to come out here and talk about all this stuff and not talk about how it applies to you. I've already alluded to my first point, and that was the fact that I got around people who are better than me. There are people in this world, and this is just the truth, there are people in this world who are better than you, and they're better than me. They're better in business, they're better in health and fitness, they're better in relationships. There are people out there who are so much better than each of us. Yet so many people are afraid to get around people who are better than them. And the reason, one major reason people are cautious about doing so is because one of the big fears is that maybe their lack of knowledge or experience will show, or that they'll feel inferior. But that's one of the greatest mistakes I think people make, is that they don't get around people who are better than them intentionally, deliberately, getting around those who they can learn from. Again, when my mentor came to the hospital, I didn't intend on meeting him. He just happened to come, and he talked to 20 or 30 of us. And here, I can pose for you too. There we go. Lockheed. That's right. I didn't know this and then go out and do it. It actually just kind of happened in my life. And since then, I've had other guys who were injured and further along than me in my injury and their injury that taught me things about how they dealt with issues. I remember there was a major. There was a guy, he had been injured in combat. He was an infantry platoon leader. At the time I was there, he was in the medical field at that point. He and I talked for about 15 minutes one day when I was in rehabilitation. And I remember that was a turning point in my life because everything he said in that 15 minutes connected more with me than anything all the doctors had told me in the past 9 months I was there. And it's important to just not connect with people who are like you, but also people who, look at people who are where you want to be. So many people are stuck in their peer group and there's nobody better than them in that peer group. I mean, a lot of people, I'm in a number of business groups where I actually pay money to be a part of them because there are people in there that are better than me in business. They're better than me at marriage, and I want to get around those people because until I do, I'm not going to become any better personally. And so that kind of goes back to what I said in the very beginning. I'm no exception. I'm not just some guy who bounced back resiliently and amazingly. That's not me. Again, there are people in my life who either came into my life or I intentionally sought after them and got around them and did anything I could to be around them as much as possible because I knew how much I could benefit from being around them. Another thing you have to think about too is that not just having mentors in your life, but being a mentor in somebody else's life. I know we hear the mentorship word a lot, probably with troubled youth and whatnot and stuff like that, but it's really important. I mean, you're never too old. I mean, mentorship should be it's a lifelong process. And it's interesting because somebody can help you out, and this is actually psychologically and biologically, you can ask any mental health professional, this is what actually happens when you help somebody else. That person is helped. There's something that goes on in their brain and their mind, because all of our emotions are chemical based. They just are if you know the physiology of it. But when you do something for somebody else, you positively affect them, but there's also a reciprocal effect that comes back on you, whether you know it or not, it happens. But in addition to that, everybody who's standing around who witnessed you doing something good for somebody, they're affected by it. And everybody, each of those three parties, is more likely to repeat that behavior. And so if you do bad stuff, it works that way too. But if you do the good stuff, I remember one of the biggest things that helped me out, and you might relate to this, or you might come across an opportunity like this in your life. I was about a week out of the hospital, maybe 2 weeks out of the hospital, still wrapped up in bandages. I drove to the gas station right outside the medical center. And as I walked in, there was a homeless guy sitting right there next to the door. He wasn't bothering anybody, wasn't asking for money. He was just sitting there with a backpack. And I'm not telling you this story to say, wow, look how charitable Brian is. I'm not telling you that. Because messed up as I was in no shape to encourage anybody. You didn't look at me and go, wow, that guy's an inspiration. You looked at me and you went, man, that guy is jacked up. What in the world happened to him? So I wasn't in any position to do that, in my opinion. But I walked in and I got this really strong inclination that I needed to buy a bag of groceries for that guy. Just, $10 maybe, whatever. It's fine. I can afford it. And I walked out and I just gave it to him. I said, hey, I just felt really strongly. I wanted to do this for you. And this was another big game changer in my life because I didn't know how it was going to affect me. I gave it to the guy and he looked up at me and he started to cry. And at that moment, I had no idea what I was doing. I was in foreign water. I had no idea. I didn't know I was going to have that effect on him. And I sat down right there on the sidewalk next to him, and we just talked. And that right there did for me what all the antidepressants and all the medications that a lot of us have thrown at us never did. Those things mask a symptom. They say, oh, those are pills for PTSD. No, people don't take pills for PTSD. They take pills for the symptoms of PTSD and depression and all these other things to treat the symptoms. What that did, it got to the root of the issue. It began surgery in my own mind through trying to reach out and help this guy. And so, it was just the greatest thing. I didn't do it for me, but here's the thing. A lot of people get hooked on certain behaviors. They get hooked on certain drugs or habits, alcohol. There are a lot of things that people do to try and pacify this experience or fulfillment, this sense of fulfillment they're trying to seek in their lives. In the same way that people get addicted to drugs, I got addicted to that feeling because I was looking for meaning and purpose in my life through that experience that I went through. I didn't really seek the meaning and purpose in my life until I went through that and realized how important life is and how quickly it can be over. In fact, it was Viktor Frankl. If you've ever read the book Man's Search for Meaning, it's an incredible book. Viktor Frankl, he was in several Nazi prison camps and survived. And he talked about the people who didn't survive or the ones who did. How did the people make it out that did make it out? Obviously, given their number wasn't up. And he said one of the most common attributes among people who made it out of those bad places alive were people who believed, they chose to believe that they were going to see their loved ones again, or that there was an ultimate purpose or meaning behind their suffering, and that they found significance in their suffering. And I heard this about a year after my injury and getting out of the hospital, and I realized that was exactly what brought me through. Why do two people go through the same experience? One person rebounds and comes back, and the other person just goes really down a really bad path. It's not that one person has more value as a human being or that somebody's better. It has to do with the fact that this person had some sort of knowledge and ambition, and they believed a certain way that something was possible when the other person may have just given up hope altogether. It came down to the individual. What we also have to do is identify the real enemies in our lives. In your life, a lot of times, it looks like you have something going on in your personal life or your relationship or your marriage, and it looks like the other person is the issue. How many of you have been married and you know the other person isn't always the issue? Look, here's a chapter in my next book I'm writing. That'll be out in 2015. It's called Other People Aren't the Problem. And you know some people who need that chapter. I needed that chapter. Sometimes they're the problem, other times they're not. But what I found is that usually, whatever the obvious problem is, the truth of it usually lies right beneath the surface. It's usually not the other person. Sometimes it is. Don't get me wrong. Some people are just difficult. My co-author of my book, Redeployed, Chad, he speaks and he talks about his marriage. And he was a Force Recon Marine. He's a cage fighter, 19-2 as a pro, 5'3", fights at like 130 pounds. Nicest guy in the world, but he'll just take people apart in a cage. And he was talking about, he's not a quitter type. He was special operations in the Marine Corps. And him and his wife, they were on the verge of, one dotted line away from divorce. They had sold their house. They were done. And his wife one day said, you'll run into those caves in Afghanistan and die for your guys next to you. You go on the jiu-jitsu mats and you'll train for 16 hours a day. She said, but when it comes to our family, all you do is give up and quit. Yeah, and he said that was the turning point. He said it was two things. One, he hated what she was saying, but number two, that made the biggest difference, he knew she was right. And they've been married 20 years now. They actually help people with that. And so the real enemy wasn't always them coming at each other. It was actually a few underlying issues that were major that neither of them were seeing. And so instead of coming at each other, they aligned themselves beside each other and they identified that issue that was causing the problem and they attacked the issue together. Just like you do in combat. If you got an enemy coming against you, you don't have the Alpha and the Bravo team fighting each other. What do you need an enemy for? What do you need Taliban for if you got a platoon, taking shots at each other out in Afghanistan? The enemy would just sit there and say, hey, let them take care of themselves. Well, so many times in our lives it's that way. In our work relationships or in our businesses or in our personal relationships. And it's like you've got to identify who the real enemy is. In Afghanistan, the enemy might be wearing a burqa and look like a lady walking down the street until she pulls out an AK-47 and starts firing at you. Then you know she's an enemy, but you don't always know who those are. In fact, how many of you remember Blockbuster Video? I haven't been to one in a while, have you? I'm not dancing on their grave. I think they're gone. But that was a great business example. 10 years ago, they owned their industry. Then over the past 6-7 years, you have this thing called Netflix and Redbox come out. And it seems like overnight, they just overtook their own industry. And I look at that and I go, why didn't Blockbuster join in on that? Why didn't they do something about that? And I don't know the whole story, but I started seeing these blue boxes pop up about 3-4 years ago. Not as much as Redbox, but just a few. And now I don't see any of them. Basically what happened was, obviously Blockbuster didn't see the enemy in their industry and the takeover, and by the time they realized it was too late. How many of us have the opportunity to save our relationships, our friendships, our jobs, yet a lot of times we don't look at things for what they are, and we end up, by the time we realize it, it's just too late. I'm fortunate, again, I've had better people than me come into my life that have helped me see those things before I encounter them. That's what's made the big difference in my life. Or even Twinkies. How many of you remember Twinkies went out of business? You know it's bad when you can't afford to make a Twinkie. I was speaking over here in Dallas, and my buddy Cole, who's here with me today, he was with me. We went in to get a drink right before my talk at like a CVS and getting some juice. And I walked past the Twinkie display. And I thought they went out of business. I didn't plan on getting Twinkies that day, but I had to get one, and here's why. I'm more of a chocolate guy, but they had a Twinkie display. And right on top of it, there's this little sign, and it says, Twinkies, the greatest comeback in the history of ever. I'm like, that's got to be a publicity stunt. There's no way they didn't go out of business. I bought a Twinkie. It got my attention, but, as I wrap up here, though, it's sometimes in life you think things are over, and they're not. Sometimes just when you think you're past the worst of it, you're not. I remember this happened when I was at Brooke Army Medical Center. My first night there, they said that, all right, I saw my wife. They said, hey, we got to go clean him up. They took me into the shower room. I was happy about that because it was 120 degrees in Kandahar, and I hadn't showered in a week. So I thought, wonderful, finally getting a shower. And they took me in there, and the doctor, or the nurse, looked at me, and he said, Sergeant Fleming, we're going to do this as quickly as possible so that this will be as painless as possible. And it was at that point, him and about 3 other nurses, they all pulled out razor blades, and they had to start shaving and ripping and tearing that skin off of my hands and my face and my neck. Now, that was just 10% of my body. I have buddies, again, who are 20, 30, 60, 80% plus. And I can imagine the pain they went through. But that was enough pain right in that moment to just make me pray to die. I wanted out. I just wanted to be unconscious. Just when I didn't think it could get any worse, I thought I was past the worst of it, and something like that happened. They keep you awake for it because a lot of times they have to do it multiple times. And if they put you under anesthesia multiple times, you can fall into a coma and not wake up. Opposite end of the spectrum, they have to do it fast, or you can go into shock from the pain. So, needless to say, it was a really bad experience, and we all have those really bad experiences. Could I have faulted the guys? Yeah, I could have faulted the nurses, but I knew that if I did, it would just prolong the pain. I just wanted the pain to be over with. But one of the biggest things, and I alluded to this earlier, was other people that I got around. And I want to show you a couple quick pictures here of people I got around, and I'll bring it up in a minute, but it's hard to feel bad for yourself with certain people hanging around. Have you ever had somebody like that where it's like they get around and all of a sudden you don't feel that bad about yourself anymore when you're having a bad day? I met a lady named Mary last year in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and we were at a veteran fundraiser my buddy Jay Redmond puts on. He's a Navy SEAL. If you've seen the book The Trident, he's the one who wrote that. And I met Mary and her husband. They were both EOD techs, to take apart bombs. Well, Mary had been injured in Iraq. She disarmed a bomb, she picked it up, and she sat it in the back of her truck. But when she did, for some odd reason, when she sat it down, something hit, and it blew up in her face. And it knocked her about 30 feet across the street. And she lost both arms at the elbow. And when I got there, she's laughing. She's having a good time. She has this like wacky red and purple hair. I mean, electric personality. She's just amazing. And she's wearing this T-shirt that says, T-Rex hates hand grenades. It's got a picture of a T-Rex, and it's looking down. It's got like a grenade on the floor. It can't reach it. I mean, this is the kind of person she is. And I told her about my license plate. We got to talking. And she said, I've got a license plate too. I said, really? And she said, yeah, this is mine. It says unarmed. How do you feel bad for yourself with somebody like that standing around? Her favorite restaurant is called, Stumpy's. It's up near Fort Lewis in Washington. She has a picture of her outside of Stumpy's, right next to the sign, going like this, of course, And she has people, she said, come up to her and they say, what, are you not for the Second Amendment? Are you not for gun rights, unarmed? Because you can't tell that she's missing arms when she's in the vehicle. And then she'll just go, what are you talking about? And they go, oh my God, I didn't know. And they apologize, and she just has the most fun with them. I can't feel bad for myself. I've had a lot of tough battles. You've had a lot of tough battles, but it's not. You don't have to look far to find somebody who's in a worse spot. Or then there's my buddy Shallow Harris. Shallow was also with the 10th Mountain Division, and he was burned about 60-some% of his body. Vehicle got blown up just like mine did. He just happened to be worse off. He comes in a couple months ago, and I got my little girl with me. My daughter Kaylee is 3. And he walks in. Well, he's burned in the skull, missing his ears. They're burned off. And he walks in, my daughter looks at him and she says, hey, where are your ears? And he looks down at her and he says, they're in the car. And she goes, Dad, I want to put my ears in the car. She starts pulling. I said, well, you can't do that, baby. Well, fast forward a few hours to dinner, and Shala walks in again. And he's got prosthetic ears, but they're not just your any-day prosthetic ears. They're, if you can see what he's holding right there, they're like Spock ears. They're like elf ears. They're pointed. So he walks in. He's got 2 pointed prosthetic ears on, like an elf. And that's my daughter right there. And, just looking at, he's showing it to her. Hey, here are my ears, And so I just look at that, and I just can't feel bad for myself. There's always somebody worse off. and you can always learn so much from those people. And I mean, I've talked to a lot of doctors. I've become friends with a lot of doctors. I didn't do it to really get help. My intention was to gain knowledge, so that as I help other men and women in uniform or anybody really who's had bad situations, I need to be up and up on what I know as it relates to what can help them, because it's my obligation if I'm going to help people out or I'm going to speak on a topic that I'm able to be, as advanced in that knowledge as I can. And one way we've done that, by the way, I've got a book here called Never the Same. I wrote it while I was in Afghanistan. It's the untold story of one soldier's personal encounter with a suicide bomber. It basically ends as I'm getting out of the hospital. And then we have another book here called Redeployed, and it's how combat veterans can fight the battle within and win the war at home. And again, like I talked about earlier, we wrote it for the military, but we had a lot of civilian feedback because we realized we're not talking about just military issues. These were human issues. People who had never been anywhere near Afghanistan or Iraq or a battlefield in the military were relating to a lot of stuff we talked about, how we overcame these issues. And so me and Chad, we put our heads together. We wrote the book. Anybody watch UFC in here? Cage fighting? Anybody? You know who Randy Couture is, I'm sure. He did us the honor of writing the foreword. He's an Army veteran. And even if you don't get a book, the books actually, they're usually $15 each, but if you want both books, we'll give you both books for $20 today. And so that's something we can do. And we give these out to the military for free of charge, by the way. And even if you don't get a book, I've got this card out there. It's 10 rules for standing firm when everything around you is blowing up. Please, if you don't do anything else, take one of these. They're free. And these are 10 of about 50 points I have that are going to be in my next book coming out later this year. And also, I help people communicate better and public speaking and all that, and that's just a little plug there for that. But these are free. You can learn more about it. That's a free video series online. But you know what? At the end of the day, I guess all I can say about this whole experience and what I've learned is, again, I'm glad it happened. It gave me a life that I never imagined could happen. I'd never imagined I'd get the opportunities I now get because of something bad. I found significance in my suffering. If you do nothing else with your life experience, seek to find the significance in your own suffering. The bad stuff isn't going away. That's the world we live in. Bad stuff will happen, I promise. It's how you respond to it. It's what you do with it and what you know how to do with it and what you're doing for other people who are currently going through it. That's what's going to make the greatest difference in your life and the lives of those who are around you. So, again, I appreciate you all. And getting attacked by a suicide bomber, it never felt so good. Again, I know it sounds funny. It sounds insane. I know. Got my medical file. I'm probably a little bit insane. But it's provided me this opportunity to thank all of you and to come connect with you all today. And I appreciate that opportunity. So thank you again for making that happen, and all of you. So appreciate you.
Can you hold both the books up from over here?
Oh, yeah. There you go.
One on each side.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, sit them down.
All right.
If you will. Cross your arms there.
Cross my arms? I'm going to pose now. GQ, right? Yeah. Sideways this way?
There you go. Right.
Okay.